I sit in the conference room at Kravitz and Holt, with both palms flat on the laminate table, and watch my attorney slide a piece of paper across the surface toward me. August light comes through the Venetian blinds and strips. My hands are not shaking. I notice that, and I think it's worth noticing. 2 years ago, she told me I'd be back on my knees in 3 months, I say. I want you to write that down somewhere, Stan, because I want to remember I was thinking about it right now, in this room, and I wasn't on my knees. Stan Holt is 62 years old and has seen everything twice. He writes it down without blinking. I look at the restraining order application. My name, Donna's name, the date, everything in its column. Here's the thing about sitting in a lawyer's office at 54 years old, signing paperwork that ends a marriage. It doesn't feel the way you think it will. I always figured it would feel like a car crash. It felt more like the last day of a job you'd been meaning to quit for 2 years. Sad, a little, overdue, mostly just quiet. I'll back up. My name is Ray Kowalski. I run a regional processing plant in Youngstown, Ohio. Kowalski Regional Processing. 8 years I've been building it, starting from a foreman's wage and a second mortgage on a house I'm not currently living in. When I signed the lease on the plant space, Donna called it a midlife vanity project. She said it with a smile, the way she said most things that were meant to cut. She was good at that. The smile made it harder to answer. The week I signed the lease, she sat across from me at the kitchen table and said it plain. You'll collapse in 3 months, then you'll be back on your knees. She said it like she was being realistic, like she was the sensible one in the room, and I was a kid with a crayon drawing of a dream. I left the house the next morning without saying goodbye, and I never went back to sleep in that bed the same way again. Something shifted, not dramatic, just a quiet closing of a door inside me that I didn't go back and reopen. The plant didn't collapse. It took about 14 months before I stopped holding my breath, and then it just kept growing. By the time I'm sitting in Stan Holt's conference room, Kowalski Regional Processing has crossed 7 figures in annual revenue. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying it because it matters to what comes next. I found out about Gary Phelps the way you find out about most things you weren't supposed to know, by accident, on a Tuesday in late August, when the heat was still sitting on Youngstown, like it had nowhere else to be. I was at the plant, end of a long shift, sitting on the loading dock with my phone. One of those shifts where you don't sit down until 8 o'clock, and then you don't want to stand back up. I was scrolling half asleep when a mutual acquaintance tagged a photo from a Youngstown Air Reserve Station family appreciation event. Donna was in the frame. Arms around a man I recognized from 15 years back. Gary Phelps, big grin, same as always. The kind of grin that says, he's the most comfortable person in any room, and he wants you to know it. The geolocation metadata was visible in the post. The timestamp on the photo was a Friday. The Friday Donna told me she was in Columbus visiting her mother. I didn't feel the floor drop out. I felt the opposite. Like everything got very still and very clear, the way the air gets right before a real storm, when you can smell the rain before the clouds arrive. I set the phone face down on the dock railing, stood up. My vision went gray at the edges for about a second. Not dramatic, just my body registering something my mind hadn't caught up to yet. I put one hand on the railing, breathed through my nose, counted the rail cars in the yard, got to 4. The gray cleared. I picked up the phone and I screenshotted the photo. I did not call Donna. I drove home. I watched her make dinner. I answered her questions in complete sentences. I slept on my side of the bed and stared at the ceiling until 2 in the morning. I could have asked her that night. I had the screenshot. I had the timestamp. I had 15 years of knowing exactly what her lying face looked like. But I didn't ask, and if you want to know the truth, I'm still not completely sure why. Maybe I needed one more day of the marriage, being what I thought it was. Or maybe, and this is the part I don't like admitting, I already knew what I was going to do, and I needed her not to know that I knew. There's a version of me that's not proud of that. I'm still working out which version is right. I walked out to my truck after the meeting with Stan. Dark blue F-150, 2019, 90,000 miles on it. I sat in the cab with the engine off. The parking garage was quiet. I had a gas station coffee in the cup holder that had gone cold an hour ago, and I drank the rest of it anyway. 6 minutes. Then I started the truck and drove back toward Youngstown. 48 hours after the photo, I was in the garage at 6 in the morning. That was my room, my workbench, my tools, the smell of motor oil and old concrete. Donna hadn't set foot in there in 3 years. I had the radio on low, and I was pretending to organize a socket set I'd already organized twice. I saw her through the garage window before she saw me. Carol Phelps, Gary's wife, 49 years old, dark hair pulled back, standing on my front porch in a gray jacket at 6:15 in the morning. She looked like someone who had driven over before she could talk herself out of it. I went through the house and opened the front door. She didn't say good morning. She said, "Is she here?" "No," I said. "Can I come in?" I stepped back and let her through. We sat at the kitchen table. I made 2 mugs of black coffee. Neither of us was crying. Carol had her hands around her mug, and she looked at me the way a person looks at someone when they're deciding how much to say. "How long have you known?" she asked. 48 hours? "I've known for 6 days. I needed to be sure before I came here." "Sure of what?" "That you weren't going to do something stupid and ruin it." I looked at her. "What does ruin it mean to you?" "Confront them. Make a scene. Give them time to get their stories straight." She wrapped both hands tighter around the mug. "I've been a paralegal in family court for 11 years. I know what happens when the emotional side moves faster than the legal side." I told her what Donna said, the line about collapsing, about coming back on my knees. I said it flat, no performance, just the words. Carol went still. Then she said, "We're going to need that on record." That's when we heard Donna's footsteps on the stairs. She came into the kitchen in her work clothes, already dressed, and stopped when she saw Carol sitting at her table. For about 2 seconds, her face did something complicated. Then, she put the polished version back on. "Carol." Her voice was controlled, warm even, the way it gets when she's performing for an audience. "I don't know what he told you, but whatever this is, sit down, Donna," Carol said. Donna looked at me. "You invited her here? Are you serious right now?" I made coffee, and I said, "You want some?" She stared at me. I could see her working through it, deciding which angle to take. Then, she picked up her purse from the counter and walked toward the door. On the way past, her elbow caught her coffee mug. I don't know if it was an accident. The mug bounced off the tile and spun under the table. Didn't break. Donna didn't look back. The front door closed behind her with a small, precise click. Carol and I looked at each other across the table. "Okay," Carol said. "Yeah," I said. Neither of us moved to pick up the mug. Carol opened her bag and set 3 things on the table. Gary's phone records, pulled through a family court subpoena template she had access to as a paralegal. Base visitor logs from a public records request she'd filed 10 days ago. And a hotel receipt from a Hampton Inn 11 miles from my plant. I opened my desk drawer and came back with a manila folder. 2 years of Donna's mileage discrepancies. I run a plant. I know how to read a fuel log. A second cell number I'd traced to Gary's contractor account through a vendor directory he was listed in publicly. And a name. "Pam Griggs," I said. "Who's that?" "Donna's friend. Works at Valley Title and Escrow." She booked the hotel room. "It's on Donna's visa, but the reservation name is Griggs." Carol looked up. "How do you know that?" "Because I pay the visa bill. And 6 months ago, I saw a confirmation number on the notepad by the phone in Pam's handwriting. I thought it was for a bridal shower." Carol was quiet for a moment. "You've been sitting on this." "I've been being careful." She nodded slowly. "All right. Then, let's be careful together." That afternoon, I drove to Walt Decker's place on Glenwood. Walt is 67, retired from Valeric Star after 31 years as a shift foreman. He's been my neighbor for 12 years, and he is the most methodical human being I have ever met. The man keeps records of everything. Not because he's paranoid, just because he never trusted anyone else to remember correctly. He had a Yuengling open before I finished parking. "I was wondering when you were going to come over," he said. "You knew?" "I kept a log." "Didn't know what for." "Figured I'd know when you needed it." He handed me a spiral notebook. Diesel and machine oil on the cover. I opened it. Dates, times, a truck description. Gary's white Silverado. Tuesdays between noon and 3 in the afternoon. 7 confirmed the entries over 4 months. Walt lived 2 houses down and his kitchen window faced the street. He'd written down every visit. No drama. Just dates and times in his careful block printing. Walt, I said, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Drink your beer. I drank my beer. Then Walt said, completely without expression, that he had also logged the Tuesday back in June, when Donna's sprinkler head had come loose and hit his dog, and he'd been waiting for the right moment to bring it up. I laughed. Out loud, real? The kind that comes up before you can stop it. It lasted about 4 seconds. Then it was gone. But it happened. That night, after Donna called to say she was going to her sister's and didn't explain further, I sat at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning. I'd poured 3 fingers of Yuengling into a glass, a beer in a whiskey glass. I don't know why, it just seemed right. I opened my laptop and stared at the vendor directory where Gary's logistics firm was listed as an approved supplier for a regional contractor network. I looked at his company name for a while. Phelps Logistics Solutions, LLC. Then I closed the laptop. I went out to the garage and sat on my workbench stool until the sky started going gray. I did not sleep. The next morning I met Carol at Rudy's Diner in Boardman. Cracked vinyl booths, laminated menus, the kind of place that serves breakfast at 4 in the afternoon without asking why. A guy in a Carhartt jacket at the counter was arguing with his phone. The waitress refilled our coffee without being asked. Carol and I ate eggs. I called Dale Pruitt, she said. I looked up. You know Dale? I know of him. You told me he was your college roommate. I looked him up. He's been at the Vindicator online for 22 years. He's not running anything yet. No, he's holding it. That's better. She was right. Dale Pruitt, news desk editor at the Youngstown Vindicator online, was the kind of man who didn't get excited about things, which was exactly why you trusted him. When he finally decided something mattered, Carol left the diner first. I sat there with a third cup of coffee I didn't need and thought about the fact that the 2 people who currently knew the most about my marriage were a paralegal I'd met 4 days ago and a retired foreman who kept a spiral notebook out of sheer habit. Donna had spent 15 years telling me I didn't have people. She meant it as an insult. I was starting to think she was just wrong. I moved out of the house on Elm Street 3 weeks later, rented a 2-bedroom near the plant, beige walls, nobody's furniture, a coffee maker I bought at a Walmart on the way over. It was fine. It was quiet. I slept better than I had in 2 years. Marcus showed up on a Wednesday afternoon without calling first. He's 17, my son, built like me, but quieter about it. He dropped a tablet on my kitchen counter without saying hello. She had me and Lily set up a shared account, he said. I found the thread this morning. I picked up the tablet and read through it. Donna, coaching both kids on what to tell a custody mediator. Emotionally absent. Never home. Prioritized the business over the family. The messages were dated over 3 weeks. She'd been building this for a while. I'm not lying for her, Marcus said. I set the tablet down. I stood at the kitchen window and looked out at the parking lot for about 30 seconds and breathed. Then I turned around. You don't have to, I said. She's going to know I came here. Probably. I don't care. I had gripped the edge of the counter at some point. My knuckles were white. Marcus saw it. I let go. I opened the refrigerator, pulled out 2 sodas, set one in front of him, and sat down. You eat? I asked. No. I'll make something. We didn't talk about the tablet again that night. We didn't need to. 20 minutes after Marcus left, Donna called my cell. I was in my truck in the plant parking lot. I answered. You turned my own son against me, she said. I made him a sandwich. Don't do that. Don't be cute. He came to you and you didn't send him home. He's 17, Donna. He drove himself. You're poisoning my children against me, and I will make sure everyone knows. Everyone knows what exactly? Silence. Then she hung up. I sat in the truck for another 10 minutes with the engine off. The parking lot was empty. A crow was doing something purposeful on top of a light post. I watched it for a while. I called Dale Pruitt. Ray, he said, you talked to Carol. I did. What do you think? Dale was quiet for a moment. That was his thing. He never answered before he was ready. I think, he said, that you have something real. I think the question is when and how, not whether. I need it to be airtight, I said, I know. And I need it to land where it hurts. Another pause. I can do that. But I need you to get me one more thing. What? Dennis Hobart. I knew the name. Dennis Hobart ran an HVAC contracting business out of the East Side. He and Gary went back 20 years. He was the kind of man who helped with the wrong thing because he never asked what it was for. Why Hobart? I said. Because Gary's been running his personal scheduling through Hobart's business line. Hobart doesn't know I know that. But if you ask him the right question, he'll tell you everything he's ever done wrong, just to make sure you don't ask him anything worse. I smiled a little. You've been doing this a while. 22 years, Dale said. Call me when you have him. I drove to Rudy's the next morning and met Carol, told her about Dale's request. She already knew about Hobart. Of course she did. He's deposed before, she said. Twice, family court, different cases. He folds, every time. So we approach him. We let him come to us. I'll make sure he hears something that makes him nervous enough to reach out. I looked at her across the laminated table. You're very good at this. Carol picked up her coffee. My husband has been cheating on me for God knows how long and using his friend's business line to do it. I have been calm for 6 days. I am being very productive with that energy. Fair enough. The Rita Calloway situation developed on its own, which is the best way for those things to happen. Rita was Donna's friend. Loud, social, ran an event planning business out of Boardman. She and Donna had been close for years. Rita was the kind of person who was fiercely loyal until she was publicly embarrassed, and then she became, as I would find out, the most organized enemy you'd ever seen. What happened was this. Donna told Rita about the separation. She told her version of it, the version where I was cold, distant, obsessed with the business, emotionally unavailable. Rita repeated this version to a group of mutual acquaintances at a birthday dinner for someone I barely knew. One of those acquaintances was Pam Griggs. Pam, who had booked the hotel room. Pam, who had written a confirmation number on a notepad in my kitchen. Pam, who was now sitting at a birthday dinner, hearing Donna's version of the story, and nodding along, not knowing that I knew what I knew. I found out about the dinner through Walt, who heard it from his daughter-in-law, who was at the dinner. Walt texted me at 9:30 that night. Pam Griggs was there. She looked nervous. I texted back, good. The thing about Pam Griggs is that she performs friendship as social currency. She spends it freely until the cost reverses. And the cost was about to reverse significantly. Dale called me on a Thursday. I've got Hobart, he said. He came to you? He called me. Said he heard I was looking into some contractor billing irregularities, and he wanted to clarify a few things. And he talked for 40 minutes. I have it on record, with his consent, because I told him it was a background interview for a business profile piece. I was quiet for a second. Is that legal? In Ohio, one-party consent. I was the one party. What did he say? Enough, Dale said. Gary's been using Hobart's business address as a secondary contact point for personal scheduling. Hobart forwarded messages, booked meeting rooms under the Hobart mechanical name, let Gary use a company credit card for expenses that had nothing to do with HVAC. Does Hobart know what he was actually scheduling? He does now, Dale said. I asked him a direct question. He went very quiet. Then he said, and I'm quoting, I thought it was vendor meetings. Then he said, I'd like to not be part of whatever this becomes. Too late, I said. That's what I told him, politely. The confrontation with Donna happened on a Saturday morning in October, the first real cold snap of the season. She had called and asked if we could meet at the house. I agreed. I drove over, parked in the driveway, walked in through the front door that I still had a key to. She was in the living room. She had dressed carefully. That was Donna's tell. When she was preparing for something, she dressed for it. I want to talk about the divorce terms, she said. Okay. I think we can do this without it getting ugly. I sat down. I think you're probably right. She seemed surprised I agreed. I've been talking to my attorney, and there are some things I think we can work out directly. Like what? The house. I want to stay in the house. I've been here 14 years, Ray. The kids grew up here. I think that's reasonable. What else? The business. She said it carefully. I was here for all of it. The second mortgage was on this house. I contributed to the foundation of what you built. I looked at her. You called it a midlife vanity project. I was scared. I was being honest about my fear. That's not the same as not supporting you. I almost laughed. I didn't. Donna. What? I know about Gary. The room got quiet, not movie quiet. Just the specific quiet of a Saturday morning in a house in Youngstown, when the furnace kicks on and a car goes by outside and nothing else happens. Donna's face didn't fall apart. She was too controlled for that. But something went out of it. A light, maybe. The performance light. Ray, I've known for 2 months. I didn't say anything because I was being careful. You know me. You know I'm careful. It's not what... Don't, I said. Please don't tell me it's not what I think. I have hotel receipts. I have phone records. I have a spiral notebook from Walt Decker with 7 entries in block print. I have a paralegal who pulled public records, and I have a news editor who has been holding a story for 3 weeks. She stood up. You went to the newspaper? I went to my college roommate. He happens to work at the newspaper. Ray, if you publish something, I haven't decided anything, I said. That's the thing, Donna. I'm still deciding. And the more you talk right now, the less room you have to influence how this goes. She sat back down. That was the first time in 15 years I'd seen her do something she didn't decide to do. What do you want? She asked. I want a fair settlement. I want the business left alone. I want the custody arrangement to reflect what actually happened in this house, not the version you were coaching Marcus and Lily to tell a mediator. She went white. Marcus told you. Marcus is 17, and he's not going to lie for you. You should have known that. He's more like me than you ever gave either of us credit for. I was protecting myself. You were building a case out of things that weren't true. There's a difference. She stood up again. This time, she walked to the window, stood with her back to me for a moment. I made a mistake, she said, with Gary. It was a mistake. I know. And I'm sorry. I know that too. She turned around. So what happens now? Now, I said. You call your attorney on Monday and tell her you're open to a straightforward settlement. The house goes on the market. We split the equity. The business is mine entirely, because my name is on every document and you know it. Custody is joint with standard terms, and nobody coaches my kids. And the newspaper? The newspaper is Dale Pruitt's decision, not mine. I don't control what he does with what he has. That's between you and the choices you made. She looked at me for a long time. You planned this. I was careful, I said. That's what I said. I stood up and walked to the door. Ray, I stopped. I really did think the business would fail, she said. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I was scared. I thought about that for a second. I know, I said. But you said it anyway. And then you said it to yourself so many times, you started acting like it was still true. And here we are. I walked out. The door closed behind me with a small, precise click. I noticed that. I thought Donna would notice it too. The months that followed were the kind of months that feel longer than they are while you're in them and shorter when you look back. Attorneys, paperwork, mediation sessions, and beige conference rooms. The house went on the market in November. The first cold snap had settled in. Frost on the windshields in the morning. Carol and I talked twice a week, sometimes more. She was going through her own version of the same process. Gary had retained an attorney and was being, according to Carol, exactly as unpleasant as a man who knows he's losing tends to be. The Pam Griggs situation resolved itself in the way these things do when you don't have to push. Pam heard through the same social network she'd been using to spread Donna's version of events that Carol Phelps had pulled hotel receipts with a reservation under Griggs's name. Pam called Donna in a panic. Donna, to her credit, did not throw Pam completely under the bus, but she couldn't protect her either. Pam stopped performing. She went quiet. She stopped attending the social events where Donna's version of the story had been circulating. When you remove the amplifier, the signal gets weaker. Rita Calloway was a different story. Rita found out about the affair the same way a lot of people in Donna's circle found out, through the controlled leak that Carol and I had agreed on, which was not a newspaper story and not a dramatic public announcement, but simply the truth told to three specific people who would ensure it traveled correctly. Rita had been at that birthday dinner, nodding along to Donna's version. She'd repeated it. She'd lent her social credibility to a story she didn't know was incomplete. When she found out the real version, she did not take it well. She called Donna. I heard about this from Walt, who heard it from his daughter-in-law, who heard it from the birthday dinner host, who was on a three-way call with Rita and someone else when it happened. Rita, apparently, was not quiet about it. "You used me," was the phrase that kept coming back in the retelling. "You sat across from me and let me defend you, and you were lying to my face." Donna, by all accounts, tried to manage it. It didn't work. Rita Calloway became, in the weeks that followed, the most organized enemy Donna had ever made. She didn't do anything dramatic. She just stopped. She stopped returning calls. She stopped including Donna in events she organized. She stopped providing the social infrastructure that Donna had been leaning on. And when people asked why, she told them, plainly and without embellishment, what she knew. That's a particular kind of damage. Not a scene, not a confrontation. Just a door closing, quietly, in every room at once. Dennis Hobart called me directly in mid-October. I hadn't expected that. "Ray," he said, "this is Dennis Hobart." "I know," I said. He stopped. Started again. "I talked to that reporter, your friend. I heard. I want you to know I didn't know what Gary was using the account for. I genuinely didn't." "Okay. I mean it. I've been doing business with Gary for 20 years, and I never would have—" "Dennis," I said, "I believe you." Silence. "That's it," he said, "that's it. You didn't do this. You got used. That's on Gary, not you." Another silence. Then, "What's going to happen?" "To you? Nothing, probably. To Gary, I don't know. That depends on Carol and her attorney and what she decides to pursue." "And the newspaper?" "Talk to Dale Pruitt if you're worried about the newspaper. I can't tell you what he's going to do." He thanked me. He sounded like a man who'd been holding his breath for 2 weeks and had just been told he could stop. I almost felt sorry for him. He was the kind of person who ended up in the middle of things because he was agreeable. There are worse flaws. There are also worse ways to learn not to be so agreeable. The settlement was finalized in November. Donna's attorney was competent, but didn't have much to work with. The business was mine. The house sold and we split the equity. Custody was joint, standard terms, no coaching provisions written in because you can't write those in. But Marcus and Lily both knew the truth, and that was its own kind of provision. Donna got a reasonable settlement. That was intentional on my part. I wasn't trying to destroy her financially. I was trying to be done. Dale Pruitt ran a piece in late October. Not a scandal story, a business profile. Kowalski Regional Processing, 8 years of growth in the Mahoning Valley. A foreman who built something from a second mortgage. The headline called me a Youngstown success story. Dale buried deep in the piece a single paragraph about a contract dispute with a local logistics firm. Phelps Logistics Solutions, LLC was named. The paragraph was accurate, sourced, and completely devastating to Gary's standing in the regional contractor community, because the regional contractor community reads the Vindicator online and knows how to read between the lines of a single careful paragraph. Gary lost 2 contracts in the month after the piece ran, not because of anything illegal, because people who do business in Youngstown don't like surprises, and a man whose name appears in a contract dispute paragraph in a business profile is a man who creates surprises. Carol told me about it over coffee at Rudy's, the week the second contract fell through. "He called me," she said, "and Gary? He wanted to talk. Said he thought we could work something out on the divorce terms." "What did you say?" "I told him my attorney would be in touch." She picked up her coffee. Well, and then I hung up. I nodded. "How are you doing?" "I'm okay." She said it like she meant it. "I'm actually okay," which surprises me a little. Why? Because I thought this would feel different. I thought I'd feel worse or better. Something bigger. She looked at the table. It just feels like things are where they're supposed to be. Yeah, I said, it does. The banquet was Carol's idea. The Mahoning Valley Veterans and Community Center held an annual contractor appreciation dinner in November. It was a big event. Drop ceiling fluorescents, folding chairs with white sashes, a podium with a base insignia. The kind of event where everyone in the regional contracting community showed up because it was the kind of event you showed up to. Gary Phelps was scheduled to receive a Community Contractor Recognition Award. He'd been nominated months earlier, before any of this. He had no way of knowing what the evening would look like by the time it arrived. Carol had been on the planning committee for 3 years. She hadn't resigned when the affair came out. She'd stayed on the committee and done her job, which meant she knew the evening's program in detail. She didn't do anything dramatic. She didn't change the program. She didn't arrange for anything to happen to Gary at the podium. What she did was invite specific people. Dale Pruitt, who came as press. Walt Decker, who came because I asked him to. Rita Calloway, who came because she organized events for a living and knew everyone in the room. And 3 of the contractors who had been considering Phelps logistics solutions for upcoming bids, who came because Rita had personally called them and mentioned that it might be worth attending. I was there too. I wore a jacket. I sat at a table near the back with Walt and Dale. Walt had a Yuengling from the cash bar. Dale had water. I had coffee. Gary walked in at 7:15. He was with 2 men from his professional network. He was doing the backslapping thing, the big grin, the room-working routine that had always been his natural state. He needed an audience to feel real, and tonight he had one. He saw me about 4 minutes after he walked in. The grin didn't disappear, but it changed. It got smaller and more careful. He didn't come over. I didn't go to him. I just watched him work the room and noted how the room worked back. 2 of the 3 contractors Rita had called were polite but brief when Gary approached them. One of them, a man named Phil Stoker, who ran a mid-size operation out of Niles, shook Gary's hand and then immediately turned to talk to someone else. Gary noticed. You could see him noticing. The award presentation happened at 8:30. Gary went to the podium and accepted a plaque and said the right things and smiled the right way. He was good at that. He'd always been good at that. When he came back to his table, Carol was standing near it. She'd been on the planning committee. She had every reason to be anywhere in that room. She smiled at Gary when he sat down. Not a warm smile. The kind of smile that means nothing good. Congratulations, she said. Gary looked at her. Then he looked around the table. Then he looked across the room at me. I raised my coffee cup. He looked back at Carol. What is this? He said quietly. It's a community event, Carol said. I'm on the committee. You're being recognized. Everything is exactly what it appears to be. Carol, my attorney will have the updated filing to your attorney by Monday, she said. The discovery materials are attached. All of them. She paused. Enjoy the evening, Gary. She walked away. She didn't hurry. She stopped to talk to someone near the dessert table, laughed at something they said, and moved on. Gary sat at his table for the rest of the evening. The 2 men he'd come with gradually drifted to other conversations. Phil Stoker from Niles did not come back to say goodbye. The room kept moving around Gary the way rooms do when someone has become, suddenly and publicly, a person to be careful around. I watched him from the back table. Walt was on his second Yuengling. Dale was making notes on something in his phone. He knows, Walt said. Yeah, I said. Doesn't feel as good as you thought it would? I thought about that. It feels exactly as good as it should. Not more, Walt nodded. That's healthy. Dale looked up from his phone. I've got 3 calls to return from people who want to talk about that business profile piece. Good calls or bad calls? Good. 2 contractors, 1 city council aide. He put the phone away. You're having a good year, Ray. I'm having a real year, I said. There's a difference. Walt raised his Yuengling. I raised my coffee. Dale raised his water. We drank. Gary left early. I saw him go. He walked out through the side door with his plaque under his arm and his jacket half on, and he didn't stop to say goodbye to anyone. The door closed behind him. I stayed until 9:30. Said goodbye to Walt in the parking lot. Walt shook my hand, which was not something Walt did often. You did this right, he said. We did this right, I said. He shrugged like that was obvious and got in his truck. I drove home in the F-150. Youngstown at night in November, the streets quiet, The old steel mill bones of the city sitting under the strip mall skin the way they always do. I'd lived here my whole adult life. I knew every road. I had 63 messages on my phone from Donna. I hadn't counted them, but Dale had, because Dale counted things. He'd mentioned it that afternoon almost as an aside. 63 messages over 6 weeks, starting the day after the confrontation at the house. Some of them were about the settlement. Some of them were about the kids. Some of them were things she'd apparently needed to say at 2 in the morning when there was nobody else to say them to. I hadn't answered most of them. Not because I was being cruel, because I had said what I had to say in that living room on a Saturday morning in October, and everything after that was paperwork. I parked in front of my apartment building, sat in the truck for a minute with the engine off. The heat was running. The windows were fogging slightly at the edges. 2 years ago, she told me I'd be back on my knees in 3 months. I thought about that in Stan Holt's conference room, both palms flat on the laminate table, and I wasn't on my knees. I was signing papers that ended something that had been ending for a long time. And the plant was running. And Marcus had eaten a sandwich in my kitchen and told me he wasn't going to lie for anybody. And Walt Decker had kept a spiral notebook out of habit and handed it to me over a Yuengling without asking for anything in return. I turned off the engine, I went inside.